Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the Human Development Report for 2015? What is the link between work and development? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're going to take a look at the 2015 Human Development Report and the link that the report makes between work and development, as well as the various types of work. My guest today is an expert on these issues. My guest today is Mr. Selim Jahan. Mr. Selim Jahan, a Bangladeshi national, is the director of the United Nations Development Program's Human Development Report Office in New York. Before joining the UN Development Program in 1992, Mr. Jahan held several positions, one as a professor of economics and director of the Economic Research Unit at the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh. Mr. Selim Jahan, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you, Bill.
I appreciate you being with me today. Let's jump right into it. What is the Human Development Report for 2015? How many reports have you had? And we'll get into it and start talking about it in greater detail.
Well, the first Human Development Report was produced in 1990, and so far we have 24 global human development reports. But I also have to mention that there have been a dozen regional human development reports in various regions of the world, and there have been 700 national human development reports. So that's quite a fit.
It certainly is. Yes, you've been very busy. Well, this is a copy of the Human Development Report 2015 Work for Human Development. And what is the thrust of it? What are some of the major recommendations that came out of this report and suggestions on how we utilize different types of work and how we develop as humans?
I think the first point to stress at the very beginning is that this is work for human development. So we are not taking jobs or employment from a limited point of view. We are also focusing on unpaid care work, on creative work, voluntary work. We are taking a broader definition of work. And the focus is how can you enlarge and enhance human development through work. And in that particular context, there are 4 or 5 major recommendations. One is that there have to be some kind of a national employment strategies. Employment should be brought at the center of the development debate, dialogues, and the policies. Second, there have to be innovative approaches to job creation, for example. So far, we have talked about growth-led jobs. Why don't we talk about job-led growth, for example? Third, there have been a lot of discussions as to how we can actually address the imbalances or gender imbalances between paid and unpaid work. And there have been targeted actions for certain groups of people, for example, the youth, persons with disabilities. And last but not the least, we also have an action agenda that we are proposing.
Excellent. Well, let's start off with number one. That's a good place to start. You say an overall strategy. Who would develop this strategy? Can governments look at this report working with the private sector? Obviously, you have to have the private sector involved in developing a strategy, but who would all be involved in that? And what would a really unique, very well functioning strategy look like?
I think that's an excellent question. When we talk about the strategy, this has to be a multi-stakeholder strategy. Yes, the government is very much there, but the whole issue of the job creation has to be made a priority by the private sector. We also know that the NGOs are also now job creators in many parts of the world. We also know that jobs are created in communities. There are more than 970 million voluntary working in communities in different parts of the world. So that needs to be a multi-stakeholders approach there. And then your second question, whether there have been successful strategies, the answer is yes. There have been at least 27 countries who have put employment as a centerpiece of their national development strategy. They have been successful in bringing different multi-stakeholders, having discussions, dialogues, because at the end of the day, it needs to be owned by the society as a whole.
It certainly does. Now, how do you decide your topics? Every year it's a different topic, and work for human development, we normally think, well, work is very commonplace. We all work, either officially or unofficially, privately, or we were paid or unpaid, whatever the case might be. But how do you pick your topics to focus on and then take a very unique perspective, a very unique microscope to look at this particular issue?
This year we have chosen the topic of work for human development for three fundamental reasons. One is work is the defining issue of our time. This is a challenge every society around the world is facing. Second, the world of work is changing very fast with globalization, with digital revolution, and it has implications for human development. It is creating opportunities but also risks. It has winners but as well as losers. And my final point is that the world is also embarking on the 2030 development agenda, known as the Sustainable Development Goals. Work can contribute in achieving the sustainable goals there. The fundamental point is, whatever issue we choose for this particular report, it is the human development lens through which we look at it. Our ultimate litmus test is it going to uplift human well-being around the world?
Exactly. You mentioned 3 or 4 very important things, the Sustainable Development Goals plus several others we'll get back to very shortly. But let's talk about number 2. I think you said take an innovative approach to looking at this particular issue and not view it through the same prism that we did before. You mentioned successful strategies. Are there various innovative approaches that are out there today that perhaps would be best practices from one country to another country or something like that? Is there a lot of innovation going on in this area?
I think there are lots of innovations going in that particular area. The what, how, and where of work is changing. What used to be called work, that frontier has extended. We now have personalized services. We can do work online and so on and so forth. The where of work has been changing. You don't need an office to do your work now. You can do it virtually from anywhere in the world. The whole question of sharing economy, the crowd working, those are the concepts that were not known to us, for example, about a decade ago. And this has implications, both positive as well as for negative. The question for every society, how you seize the opportunities that it presents. And in order to do that, I think if I take the whole question of the imbalances between men and women, between paid and unpaid work, the whole notion of the flexible arrangement of work can really help women balance both their roles. The question of, for example, parental leave, where it's not only maternal leave but also leave for the father, can change the kind of the imbalances that we are seeing there. So in terms of the innovative approaches, I think the private sector, the NGOs, even some governments are trying to deal with that particular issue. For example, in Norway, for people who are working outside the institutions but also contributing to the economy, the whole question of the flexi-security, where you provide the security in terms of pensions as well as in terms of the benefits, but through a flexible system, has been experimented.
And our viewers can go to your website, which is www.hdr.undp.org.
You got it right.
And get more information. That's a long one.
Yes.
And get more information on this report and
Absolutely.
many other items that you're dealing with in your office and previous reports too, I'm sure.
Yes, and also we are doing some innovations on our website this year. It's not only the PDF form that you can download, you can also get into different data for different countries, but we are also making the website very interactive with animations. So anybody who has data, for example, for a particular community or a particular country, can calculate the Human Development Index for that particular community. They can compare between 2 countries, or they can compare among different regions. There are a lot of infographics that we are using in this report, and will be a lot of infographics on our website as well. So we are trying to make it very user-friendly in the 21st century.
Sounds like it'd be a lot of fun too.
It is.
You'd learn
it is.
something and have fun at
It
the
is,
same time.
absolutely.
Very good. Now, you mentioned Norway. It's very interesting because Norway is a very progressive country. They have a very, I won't say unique attitude, but the Scandinavian countries have a very, they focus more on the society as a whole, I think, than many other countries do at times. But so often you hear the debate that some vested interests say, well, you can't have maternal family leave, paternal family leave, because it will cost too much. It makes the worker less competitive. The person won't be as productive, that type of thing. Are there statistics to show that that is not the case? Obviously, because Norway is a very successful country. It's doing extremely well in the international marketplace, as are other countries that have these types of programs. But are there statistics to show that maybe that's not the case, that they can be competitive and they can be even more productive, perhaps? I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, there are lots of statistics in the report to show that where countries have experimented with that kind of approaches, like Norway or Sweden, we have highlighted Israel also, and Quebec in Canada. Those countries, workers are very productive. Because at the end of the day, you also do not want to see workers only as human capital, but as human beings who are satisfied with their work. If that happens, if the environment is good, if there are good incentive systems, then the productivity of the workers go up. So in the short run, yes, you may see some hitches here and there, but in the longer term, those kind of approaches, taking human capital more like human beings, and providing them with incentives and environments can really help productivity as well as economic growth, not to mention human development.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would encourage our viewers to go to www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, perhaps you would like to suggest future topics and future guests. Today we're taking a look at the Human Development Report, a very unique body of literature, if you will, that was produced by a United Nations office. And my guest today is bringing us up to date on this very interesting report. My guest today is Mr. Selim Jahan. Mr. Selim Jahan currently serves as the Director of the Human Development Report Office to the United Nations Development Program. We're talking about the Human Development Report and various ways we've been looking at work in the past, how we look at it today, and how we're going to look at it tomorrow. I'm curious, when you mentioned earlier about the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course they're an offshoot of the Millennium, the 8 Millennium Development Goals that started in 2000 and ran to 2015 to reduce abject poverty, to promote universal primary school education, to empower women. And today there are now 17 Sustainable Development Goals encompassing all of those previous goals and expanding on them.
Sure.
How did you factor those into your report and into your way of looking at work? Because it seems like every one of those goals, eliminating poverty, empowering women, promoting education, quality education for all, would tie right into this. But how did you factor them in?
I think we are also introducing a concept of sustainable work in this particular report. And simply speaking, a sustainable work refers to work which simultaneously enhances human development as well as ensures sustainability. For example, if we do work for poor households, providing them with solar panels for energy, you are ensuring sustainability. At the same time, you are enhancing human development of those households there. Now, sustainable work and sustainable development goals are mutually synergistic. First of all, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, there are a number of issues related to work. The goal 8 is about decent work, productive work, and all kinds of things. Target 8.7 is about elimination of child labor, and the list continues. So therefore, the Sustainable Development Goals has implications for sustainable work. Similarly, sustainable work can also help achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal 1 is about elimination of poverty. Goal 2 is ending hunger. There is a goal on the whole question of the inclusive growth there. So therefore, if we go for sustainable work, they are the kind of the instruments that can be really helpful in eliminating poverty, ending hunger, as well as ensuring inclusive growth. So that's the way the two-way relationship between sustainable work and sustainable development goals has been the focus of a particular chapter there.
I don't want to get too far off track, but we hear the term Human Development Index from time to time.
We do.
What is the Human Development Index, and does that tie into the Human Development Report at all, or is that totally separate?
No, the Human Development Index is very much a part of the Human Development Report. I mean, there's the concept of human development, which basically talks about enlarging people's choices. Now, the Human Development Index is a composite measure which looks at basic dimensions of human development. The 3 dimensions that the Human Development Index, or HDI as it is commonly known, focuses on is a long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. And the indicators that we have for them is life expectancy at birth, expected and mean years of schooling, as well as per capita GDP. So the 3 points I would like to make is that the Human Development Index is a kind of a single number which tries to show the basic human development level in a particular country. The second point is that if you want to have a comprehensive picture of human development in a particular country, Human Development Index is just the beginning of it. I mean, you need to look at other important indicators of human development, like maternal mortality rate, the child mortality rate, unemployment rate, that kind of thing, to have a broader and comprehensive view of human development in a country. And then my third point is, if I can use a metaphor.
Please.
The human development accounting in its broad sense is a house, and the Human Development Index is the door. And my plea would be not to mistake the door to be the house, and don't stop at the door, enter the house.
Exactly. It's very important, but it is not the entire house.
No.
That's extremely right. That's very true. Well, this is a very interesting report, and you were talking about sustainable work. And of course, that brings to mind sustainable development, which sustainable work ties into sustainable development, obviously. And of course, when you think about that, we think about climate change. And we just saw that there's a major United Nations conference that recently concluded in Paris. The whole issue of climate change is really moving forward at a very rapid pace now. Perhaps we should have dealt with it 30 years ago, but we're dealing with it now. And that's the important thing. How do you tie into, you bring in climate change into your report? Because obviously some industries are going to be adversely affected. Fossil fuels obviously are going out of business. Coal is almost dead. Oil won't be too far behind probably. You mentioned solar panels and that type of thing, which will be coming online. Wind. Did you factor that in when you're talking about work in general and different types of employment, perhaps industries that are fading out and others that are coming online and that are even more important to help us create a more sustainable world, really?
No, we have factored it in 3 ways again. I mean, first of all, when we talked about sustainable work, I mean, we have said that there are work which need to be terminated. There are work which need to be transformed, and there are work which need to be created. You have mentioned coal as a kind of a work that needs to be terminated. In terms of transformation, ship breaking industry provides a lot of jobs in many countries, but there are no safeguards. There are no worker safety. So if you bring in the whole question of the labor safety there, they can be transformed. And then in terms of creation, renewable energy is a sector where jobs can be created. I mean, we have shown that if only 6 countries in the world, USA, China, India, South Africa, Indonesia, and Brazil, they devote 1.2% of their GDP to renewable energy, 14 million jobs can be created. So that can be created. The second point I would like to make in terms of the climate change is going to affect one major sector, which is agriculture. I mean, if there is desertification, if there are adverse impacts of the climate change, that is going to affect food production in many countries. And therefore, I think the work there would also be not only to increase production, but also to take care of the topsoil, to take care of the loss in, for example, the fertility of the land that needs to be there. And the final point is that when we talk about the sustainable development goals, say take education and health, that would also require more teachers, more nurses, and we have estimated that in order to achieve those goals in 2030, you would need additional 40 million teachers and nurses, and those also create the kind of the work. So the whole question of the climate change in the broader perspective of sustainability have been linked both to sustainable work in particular, but work in general in the report.
There are different types of work out there. We have voluntary, we have people who are paid for what they're doing. How do you distinguish between the volunteer who's working, but perhaps is not being paid, who's perhaps retired or whatever the case might be, as opposed to a worker on an assembly line or wherever it might be, and factor that in? Because they're all working, they're all being productive in some way, shape, or form, but they may not have take a paycheck home at the end of the week.
Sure. Well, I shall use something my grandmother used to say. If we would have asked her, what is a good job? And her answer would be, a good job would be which brings a huge paycheck. But in today's world, we know that the good job is not only related to money, it is also the kind of the worker safety, the right to participate, the whole question of the unions, the whole question of the dignity, the whole question of non-discrimination at work. Those are part of the good job metrics as well. So therefore, in this particular case, even if the volunteers are not paid, they don't have a paycheck. A lot of the people are volunteering in addition to their paid jobs, because they want to give something to the community. They want to work for the poor people. In India, for example, a lot of young people who have been successful commercially now are moving to social entrepreneurs, basically working for certain social objectives because they want to do something for the community. They are very much aware of the sustainability issue. They are very much aware of the coping capacity of the planet, and they want to work there. So therefore, I think the paid jobs are important. They are needed for your standard of living and everything, but people also are trying to explore other options so that they have dignity, they have satisfaction, and they have some quality of life that they have, but they want to share it with other people.
And you mentioned satisfaction. Some studies show that if a person is satisfied and derives satisfaction from his or her job, that is perhaps equally as important as receiving a paycheck in some cases, and to help achieve your self-actualization as a human being, to feel that you're contributing. And you mentioned to basically to contribute, give something back to society, but sort of have the moral paradigm that you want to help create a better world and leave the world in a better shape than when we found it. So that is very important. That internalization of the rewards of work, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter what it is, I guess, but that is so critical.
No, it is. And if I may add a footnote to that, it is also important for any particular person to get satisfaction out of a good book, to get satisfaction seeing a good paintings, for example. So the whole question of the creative work, where creative expressions in terms of writing, in terms of books, in terms of the paintings, those enhance people's knowledge, those enhance people's capabilities, as well as their satisfaction and well-being. And those are part of human development. It may not be part of economic growth, it may not be part of any kind of the income generation, but those have their values on their own, but they also contribute to human well-being.
Exactly. Are there types of work that promote inequalities? I'm thinking of, you think of a CEO perhaps of a large international corporation, perhaps earning $40 million a year. Think of perhaps a fast food worker, wherever, pick a city, any place, working for the equivalency of maybe $6, $7 an hour. Are there types of work that do promote inequality? And if they do, is there something we can do? Not that everybody's going to earn the same, I'm not arguing that, but the point is there's such a huge gap between this person and the person who's earning $40 million a year. Is there something that could be done to maybe level that field a little bit or to make it more equitable?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think it's not the type of work, it's the type of the society that we have, where we are looking at work and how work is creating inequalities. Today, 1% of the top population of the world owns 40% of global wealth, and 80% of global population has 6% of global wealth. In the US, in 1978, the compensation package of a CEO used to be around 20 to 30 times more than that of an average worker. Now it is 296 times more. So there is no economic theory, there is no social rationalization why the compensation package of those people at the top should be like that. So in order to deal with that particular issue, there have been several proposals in the report, and there have been several arguments that people have made. One is that we have to look at the growth process there, whether the growth process is pro-poor or not. That is absolutely important. We also have to look at the whole issue of the financial regulation and the regulatory framework that are there. People have been talking about more progressive taxation, for example, that needs to be done. The whole question of the innovative taxation people are talking about, that there has been ecological footprint of the richer people are larger than of poorer people. So that's some of these issues, yes.
Exactly. Well, Mr. Selim Jahan, this is a very important topic, and you have a very unique perspective in looking at something that we all do, and that is work. We all work in some way, shape, or form. But I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for your questions, and it has been a pleasure to be on your show.
My pleasure. Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.